Before I start discussing my presentation with you all, I wanted to send out all my thanks to Richard Simcott, the Polyglot Conference team, all the presenters, viewers, and my language learning icons, as well as my friends, family, and language exchange partners on Discord and Reddit. I would have been nowhere without you all, and you've all proven to be such a strong foundation for me to kind of build myself off of, and I owe you all so much. My first exposure to the Polyglot Conference was in freshman year of high school, as I'm a senior right now, and that was when I first started teaching language at a local religious center. And I looked on the internet for inspiration, and I was greeted with so much advice from Mr. Steve Kaufman, Mr. Luca Lampariello, and Miss Lindy Boats, who have motivated me to continue working on my passion, to learn about language, and also to bring about change through language and set new precedents and paradigms. They provided me with every reason to be just as equally inspired as anyone else, and I owe my gratitude to them for that. I hope to cover a few topics today that haven't been covered in the Polyglot Conference before, and that's definitely not a bad thing, but I hope to broaden that spectrum of perspectives, which is going to be an important word for my presentation today, and I'm really looking forward to kind of talking with everyone about that. So thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you guys can learn something from my presentation or just enjoy it. I wanted to put out a few disclaimers. First being, I don't claim fluency in any of the languages that I'm going to be speaking in, presenting about, or presenting in, and I just wanted to say, and it would be very haughty of me to assume that of myself, but I don't claim fluency in any of the language that I'm going to be speaking in or talking about. I just love learning language for what they are. I usually have a specific reason for learning language, which you'll probably see in the presentation, but I just wanted to put that out there. The second thing is that there's going to be limited use of Anglicisms ahead, and I also don't like Anglicisms, but just so that I can articulate better and convey my point with more detail, I've decided that some portions of this presentation would be better set in an English medium than most. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Thank you all for tuning in again, and I hope you guys enjoy. Nelson Mandela once said that if you talk to a man in a language that he understands, it goes to his head. If you talk to a man in his language, it goes to his heart. This quote also sets a foundation for the very concept of polyglottery itself and what it means to society. In the chaos and unpredictability of our world, learning languages, experiencing culture, communicating and networking as well as broadening our view of the world brings us back down to earth. I also thought of this quote the same way many of you did the first time you probably heard it. From there, language began to occupy more and more space in my mind and in my heart. My deep infatuation with language, particularly grammar and structure, started with a love for free expression of myself. While my peers detested grammar and everything it stood for me, grammar has never been associated with punctuation prisons or the shackles of syntax, to be philosophical about it. Rather, I found a sense of individuality and freedom in it to broaden my cultural awareness and my areas of interest, as well as my internal development. Because speaking a foreign language helps us unlock a new part of ourselves, as well as a part of the world. It started with my obsession for dinosaurs. These creatures are objects of fascination for many toddlers, but to me, they themselves were learning experiences. I got my first sense of Greek and Latin roots, phonology, etymology, and more just from singing rhymes with unbelievably long-winded scientific names for these beasts of the past. From paleontology to archaeology and finally to anthropology, I guess wanting to understand dinosaur paradigms and how they function sparked an interest in me to try to understand humans as well. The second was an extremely beautiful language that had been with me even before I was born. With my coming-of-age ceremonies, I went through many phases of religious interest and inquisitivity, but I never truly understood the meaning of anything until my first Sanskrit workshop. After moving to North Carolina from New Hampshire, many new opportunities presented themselves to us. But for me, none was more important than my formal education in Sanskrit. It was just around Thanksgiving time. I remember and I recall the feeling of belonging on that wintry afternoon when I stepped into Janardhan Mahodaya's home. Janardhan Mahodaya was the head of our local chapter, and I immediately felt a sense of community and passion the second I stepped in. I was met with bright smiles, new faces, and an experience that would mold my identity into who I am today. I learned basic Sanskrit before enrolling in the SAFL program. SAFL introduced me to a higher level of conversation and grammar, so in polyglot terms, probably around a B1 or B2 level. And throughout my first 2 years of high school, I went to an immersion camp at the end of the program. SAFL stands for Sanskrit as a Foreign Language. The camp taught me not only about bettering myself in the target language, but to reshape my disposition towards the language as a whole and understanding the depth and breadth of the language. After the camp, I don't know how else to put it, but I went on a Sanskrit frenzy. Many of my teachers and friends noticed my change in Sanskrit proficiency, and they would say that I changed, but on a fundamental level, I'm still me, and that's something we all relate to as polyglots. My mother told me that it was my genealogy that played a role, and reading and literature and writing and poetry and prose are all traits that my maternal and paternal grandfathers had. It's something that runs in our blood. The first portion of this talk will be about spirituality, religion, and my interactions with it, and how linguistics kind of ties everything together, as well as what some experts have to say about it. For the longest time, I felt that my interest in language, as well as in science, was an act of defiance against my belief in God. And I know that's probably overreacting and overestimating things, but there were just certain things about the world that I felt that only could be explained by a God of the Gaps philosophy, and that was kind of a wrong way to go about it. Please stay tuned so that you can find out how this fracture in my identity has kind of molded me into what I am, and how I realized that languages are more important to me than ever. Secondly, I realized implications of languages everywhere I went. From African American vernacular English to passive voice constructions in the news during the protests. Language has become a very powerful mode of influence. Once words have actions, and now they hold more power than ever. The rules of language traverse seas and cross mountains and boundaries. Even texting, snapping, and Instagramming are all part of the bigger picture. The future of language learning, cultural understanding, and linguistics lies in the hands of a select few individuals, us. We have to improve communication and foreign affairs through our knowledge of language and its structures, through democracy and through diplomacy. I wanted to talk about how those really affected me and those goals kind of shaped me. In elementary school, I first started learning Sanskrit, and then in middle school, I expanded into Spanish, and now in high school, I'm studying many languages through their history, culture, grammar, and vocabulary, while also looking at what I've done in the past and really reflecting on my privilege, as well as what I plan to do about language learning action that we should take. I'll talk about this in particular in the following sections. इदानीं किञ्चित् संस्कृतेन वाचयामि. संस्कृतपठनानन्तरं मह्यं व्याकरणं, निरुक्तम्, अन्वयं, विज्ञानं च अधिकं रोचन्ते. यत्र भाषासम्बन्धाः वर्तन्ते तस्मिन् विषये बहु कार्यं कर्तुम् इच्छामि. कथम् अस्माभिः व्याकरणम् अवगन्तुं शक्नुमः, कथं रचितं च, एतादृशाः प्रश्नाः विशदीकर्तुमेव अधिकम् अनुसन्धानं कृतवान् आसम्. इण्डो-एरियन् इति संस्कृतेन उच्यते. भाषासु कोविदः भवितुं प्रयत्नं कृतवान् आसम्. वैदिकसंस्कृतस्य कृते, सम्भाषणसंस्कृतस्य कृते च तयोः विषये कः भेदः, कथं विज्ञानेन दृश्यते इति चिन्तितवान् आसम्. यदि संस्कृतं वैज्ञानिकभाषा इति सर्वे वदन्ति, किन्तु मम शिक्षणमपरं सूचयति. किमेतत्? धर्मविज्ञानयोः सम्बन्धाः अनुसन्धीयेऽहम्. यद्मया ज्ञातं तस्य उपयोगं कर्तुम् अधिकं चिन्तयितुं च अभ्यासितवान् आसम् संस्कृतस्य कृते अस्माकम् इतिहासं ग्राहयितुम् अवगन्तुं बद्धः आसम् भाषाविज्ञानमिति एकं स्वीकृत्य संस्कृतस्य सम्बन्धिकाः भाषाः द्रष्टुम् अगच्छम् अनेकाः प्राकृतभाषाः इत्यादिनः गुरुभिः इत्युक्ते आङ्ग्लभाषायां प्रोफेसर्स् इति उच्यते पठिताः तेभ्यः अस्माभिः किं ज्ञातुं शक्ष्यामहे इति प्रश्नाः स्वीकृत्य निवारणं कर्तुम् अगच्छम् तदा मयि किञ्चित् परिवर्तनं भूत्वा इत्युक्ते शिबिरस्य अनन्तरं निर्व्यामोहेन मम धर्मं देवं नूतनदृष्ट्या पुनरवगन्तुं मया विनियोगीयते ततः रिलिजन् लैंग्वेज एंड द ह्यूमन माइंड इति नाम्ना एकम् ई-पुस्तकं मया पठितं तस्मिन् ये विषयाः आसन् अत्युत्तमाः इति चिन्त्वा अधिकं मनसि स्थापितवान् आसम् तेषाम् अभ्यासः अपि कर्तुम् यद्यपि एवोल्यूशनरी बायोलॉजी एंथ्रोपोलॉजी सोशल साइकोलॉजी च एतादृशाः समस्याः निवृत्ताः जाताः तथापि भाषाविज्ञानं कथं न अवगन्तुं शक्नोमि इति सामान्यजनाः अस्माकं धर्मं कथं दृश्यन्ते इति So to kind of talk about what that section sort of meant, I wanted to touch on this publication that I was talking about called Religion, Language, and the Human Mind. And it sort of talked about, actually it was talking about theolinguistics, which was a topic of discourse in linguistics and social psychology in the 1980s. And it talked about how as religious individuals and devout individuals, we hold certain cultural and religious things, like we hold certain beliefs, and those imprison us in a way that we can't have cross-cultural communications because there are certain jargon and certain very esoteric beliefs that we sort of live by, and that's what dharma kind of means. But that kind of inhibited me from realizing what linguistics and language learning meant to me without applying it in a religious context. And that's something that's very important, particularly for me about the Hindu identity itself. But Sanskrit was my first step towards understanding that, and especially its constituents and counterparts, the other Indo-Aryan languages, even Indo-Iranian languages at that. So that's what I kind of wanted to touch on, and that religion should be an escape and not really imprison you in that kind of sense, and how through adopting a new pair of eyes per se, or adopting a new perspective, a fresh perspective, we can look at things more clearly and have a semblance of reality and like normalcy when we adopt that kind of point of view. So that's what I wanted to talk about in that. برای درک مردم و کلابه با ناسازگاری ها ما باید با هویتمان شکل بدیم و تراگیق باشیم. به نظرم بهترین ابزاری که دارم زاویه دید چند جانبه نسبت به دنیاست. با همچین افکاری در ذهنم شروع به مطالعه زبانهای هندو آریایی کردم تا در مورد تاثیر سانسکریت یاد بگیرم و همچنین در مورد نکته توقیت دین و علم مطالعات به دست بیارم. دنبال استاد گشتم و بعد از پیدا کردن یک استاد خود زبان را یاد گرفتم و فهمیدم که چقدر جذاب هستند. به ویژه زبان‌ها شده یا پراکریت را مطالعه کردم که عبارتند از سندی، پالی، گاندهاری، اوستایی و غیره. وقتی پانینی سانسکریت ودا را به سانسکریت کلاسیک تبدیل کرد، پراکریت در آسیا پخش شد و زبان‌ها یک منطقه‌ای را تشکیل دادند. سانسکریت کلاسیک تبدیل به یک زبان معتبر شد. Hi everyone, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the education aspect now. Как я уже говорил ранее, мое образование в области иностранных языков было для меня частью моего желания заниматься лингвистикой в будущем. У меня были замечательные учителя и наставники, которые помогали мне с той интеллектуальной искрой. Они делали занятия веселыми и сложными, когда это было необходимо. Будучи студентом испанского языка, я смог улучшить свои навыки обучения и свой многоязычные команды на этом языке. В старших классах мы говорили только по-испански, слушали латиноамериканскую попсу, смотрели спектакли, изучали историю и многое другое. Этот способ обучения настроил меня на более глубокое изучение себя через интернет-ресурсы и средства массовой информации. Я смог придумать свой собственный процесс, который является еще одной великой вещью и целью в изучении языка. Со временем стало только лучше. So che questo non è il caso per tutti però. Vabbè, capisco che sia fortunato assistere una scuola in cui gli insegnanti sono addestrati bene e sono date le risorse per produrre buoni studenti e cittadini del mondo. Sono storie e notizie che molti paesi vietano l'istruzione, specialmente in Africa e in Medio Oriente. Mentre ci spostiamo in un mondo più globalizzato, non impareremo le lingue straniere, almeno sulle culture, sulle storie. Essere importante, solo perché il resto del mondo si sta muovendo verso una lingua franca inglese. Sono altre lingue obsolete? che si domande, oltre alla passione per la lingua e il desiderio di aiutare gli altri a raggiungere la loro poliglotta interiore, mi hanno spinto a creare un sito web basato sulla linguistica e l'apprendimento delle lingue, dove ho pubblicato interviste, consigli, casi di studio, elenchi di risorse e altro ancora. C'était l'idée originale du motion. Améliorer les éléments de langue étrangère en mettant des ressources de qualité à la disposition de ceux qui les souhaitent. Au cours de quelques mois, j'ai commencé à rassembler des ressources pour les langues dont je suis le plus à l'aise et à vérifier mon travail avec des enseignants expérimentés et des polyglottes. Alors, cette émission était pour moi le plus impératif. Je cherchais partout sur Internet les meilleures ressources gratuites que je pouvais trouver. Je faisais des infographies, j'écrivais des petits articles de blog et je faisais des listes de vocabulaire par le biais de mémorise. J'achèterais même des manuels scolaires et prendre des notes de tel à le sujet. Je ferais des documents imprimables et bien d'autres choses encore. En cours de mes mois de recherche, je suis tombée sur nombreuses études de psychologie et pédagogie, sur l'acquisition ainsi que sur les programmes scolaires de langue. J'ai notamment pensé à deux mots qui pourraient aider à établir des programmes dans l'école. J'ai lu de nombreuses études sur les facteurs de la motivation, la psychologie de l'apprentissage et nos capacités cognitives en tant que polyglottes. Con el advenimiento de las nuevas tecnologías, pensé mucho en cómo podrían integrárselas. ¿Qué tal aulas híbridas de idiomas extranjeros donde se enfatizan las 4 áreas del lenguaje a través del uso de las computadoras? ¿Qué tal si se mejora la enseñanza de idiomas en la escuela primaria, donde los niños son más impresionables desde el punto de vista cognitivo para el aprendizaje? Como políglotos, solo aprendemos el lenguaje de manera muy personal y desarrollamos técnicas probadas y verdaderas para usar y para el aprendizaje. Esos métodos están en constante evolución con cada gran avance en tecnología, comprensión y recursos. ¿Qué tal si los integramos en los libros de texto escolares? Detallamos la psicología detrás de estas técnicas para que puedan estar disponibles como un precedente para los nuevos aprendices, posiblemente a través de la inmersión y conocimiento cultural. Desmistificando el proceso, podemos animar a más gente para unirse en nuestras filas como políglotos y difundir la inclusividad en el lenguaje. Die Macht. Echte Veränderungen herbeiführen, zumindest in den USA, liegt bei einzelnen Schulen und Schulraten sowie staatlichen Regierungen, Gesetze und Politiken zu erlassen. Der Prozess kann teuer und ermüdend und für einige unmöglich sein. Diese werden schwer zu bewältigen sein, etwas, das für mich als Gymnasiast, der nach Möglichkeiten in der Linguistik gesucht hatte, schwer war die Knappheit von guten Programmen und Praktika. Wir sollten diese erweitern und zugänglicher machen. Wettbewerber, Olympiaden und Orte zum Netzwerk für Gymnasiasten waren auch schwer zu kommen, außer sehr wenig. Deshalb brauchen wir nicht noch mehr Gemeinschaftsbeteiligung und anstatt zu versuchen, neue Möglichkeiten zu finden, machen sie in irgendeiner Weise möglich. Ich bin aufgeregt, um zu sehen, welche Arten von Ideen, die wir mit oben kommen kann, um zu verbessern das Lernen der fremden Sprache. Durch die richtige Aneignung von Qualitätsressourcen können wir helfen, eine neue Generation von Polyglots voranzubringen.看到真相很久以后，我们可以贴着展望未来。是的，我们生活在一个各种语言和语言学习者的扩大放光彩的时代。这一个生活中的小例子，从以前我去看医生时看到了一台特别的系统收割机。这台机器用再生智慧材料可以以多种语言。它能保持黑短篇小说。类似的技术在是这个利用性真的非常的安心，这些信息是同其他语言处理，一发系统移动，还可以进一步促进人工智能和机器学习东西在一起学。随着我们语言的进步，我认为有些观赏有点需要既要说明。บทเรียนหลักที่เสนอดูอย่างไรก็ตามจำเป็นต้องมีส่วนเกี่ยวข้องกับภาษาแม้ในขณะที่ฉันต้องปรับปรุงภาษาอื่นๆฉันก็รู้มันไปจำไม่ได้ทำให้เรื่องเลวร้ายยิ่งขึ้นเพราะฉันไม่มีเวลาแต่เพราะว่ามันเป็นส่วนหนึ่งของชีวิตประจำวันที่ว่าฉันไม่จำเป็นต้องปรับปรุงภาษาไม่คงคุมเป็นจุดเริ่มต้นอันสำคัญในการเรียนรู้ภาษา 둘째로 사람들과 연을 맺기, 언어학습 커뮤니티 관여하기, 심층 언어학의 기초를 쌓기까지 당신의 기반과 경험에 최대한 도움이 될 수 있습니다. 레디슨 특정 분야에서 정보 위원을 찾을 수 있을 뿐만 아니라 자신이 직접 답변 또는 언어를 파헤는 커뮤니티 가입할 수 있는 특별한 장소가 되었습니다. 매분마다 인터넷은 새로운 기능이 추가되어 사람들이 最後に私はあらゆる方法で言語を探求しています。最近は言語に関連したものを見つけて、できるだけユニークな言語学習の機会を探しています。世界中のプログラムや研究室に参加し、言語学の最前線に新しい技術をもたらしたいと考えています。また地元のタピオカ屋さんの店員に北京語で話し聞けたり、アジア雑貨屋の人とタイ語や韓国語で会話したりと、将来に向けて小さな目標やローカルな目標を持っています。言語を学び、文化を対することで私は歴史や現代社会の果てなどについても学びたいと思っています。私にとってはペルシャ語でゾロアスタ教、中国語で古代学、ロシア語で詩を学び、そして絶滅の危機に瀕している日本語の琉球方言、沖縄方言も学んでいます。それだけでなく文化に対する意識も向上したいと思っています。自閉症と
多言語に関する本を読んだり新しい研究が頻繁に発表されたり、知っているように言語は学ぶだけではなく治療にもなります。またそれぞれの言語は新しい視点や新鮮な発見があるので人の出会いやつながりを大切にしています。
当我们接受反省时，我们可以回忆过去我们初心同时发扬未来坚定发展的方向。So we finally reached the end of this long winding tangent of a presentation, but I should follow my own advice and what I've said. So ఇప్పుడు నేను ఈ కొంచెమైనా తెలుగులో చెప్తాను మీ అందరికీ. అయితే నేను చిన్నప్పటి నుంచి తెలుగునే మాట్లాడుకుంటున్నాను, కానీ రాయడం అసలు రాలేదు. అందుకని ఈ అక్టోబర్ వరకు నేను రాయడం కొంచెం ప్రాక్టీస్ చేసుకొని అభ్యాసం చేసుకొని బడికి వెళ్తాను. చెప్పాలంటే ఈ రవివారం ఉంటుంది, ప్రతి వారం బడి ఉంటుంది. కానీ మాకు తెలిసినవైతే నేను చెప్తా. అయితే వేమన పద్యాలు యాక్టివ్గా మాట్లాడడము అలాగా యాక్టివిటీస్ ఉంటాయి. సో నేను అక్టోబర్లో వచ్చిన పాటికి నేను సంపూర్ణంగా నేర్చుకొని మీకు అప్డేట్ ఇస్తాను. So while writing the script for this presentation, I realized many things. One being that polyglottery and the concept of it is more about just learning languages. It's about learning languages together as a community, and where we can kind of have our collective spirit and talent be appreciated. All of us come from so many different walks of life, and it's opportunities like the Polyglot Conference that we can't miss. So for some time, language learning was a stressful thing for me, a stressful experience, especially in school, and managing it with my own time. And as I've grown as a language learner and as a person and as an individual who likes to learn and finally got introduced to the Polyglot Conference, I found solace in knowing that there are others like me and that we can convene and share thoughts, and I can kind of open myself up to different people and also just meet really amazing people. And I hope that this presentation has taught you a little bit about theolinguistics and some cognitive science, as well as educational reform and pedagogy. And the most interesting and most important thing, which is the aspects of learning and reflection and applying corrections for the future, as well as setting mini goals and those sorts of things. So now I'm thinking of the future, and for me that means hopefully a well-rounded college education, probably centered around linguistics, cognitive science, and computer science. And as for my language goals, that's probably going to be Arabic, Greek, and probably a few more, especially dialects, like Gyeongsang dialect, basically Busan dialect, and Kansai dialect, and a few others. And I wanted to study the nature of languages in more detail, like dialectology. Verlan is another one. History, etymology, natural language processing, and well, a lot more. But I wanted to continue researching older and more antiquated languages as well, and getting involved in endangered languages and the smaller language movement. I want to attend more conferences like this one and share my story, as well as infuse aspects about my work, my website, and my interests. And to close off this talk, I wanted to touch again on the quote that I mentioned in the beginning, that being Nelson Mandela's quote on the importance of language and communication in modern times. any language learner's goal is to become fluent in a language at some point. We could bring up the topic of the subjectivity of fluency and proficiency and what that kind of means, but surely many of us understand that and know that well enough. But I too would love to be fluent in many languages, and I've only taken a step, as you can see in this presentation. I still have a lot to do. I'd rather than aim for fluency though, I'd rather aim for self-fulfillment, and I really enjoyed just kind of trying to articulate and trying to think more culturally and more emotionally in language. And I've learned that it's not merely a spoken domain per se. It's also expressed through values and ethics, dance, music, and so much more. And it involves a lot of input and unfiltered experiences. And, well, that's at least how I see it. And the most important maxim that I live by and that I have come across just by chance maybe is the Latin carpe diem, which is seize the day. And that translates for me into bringing new ideas every day and bringing them to life and connecting with new people. Like Amir from Tehran, and we were talking about overcoming speaking fears and creating language learning games. Or my friend Joseph, and he introduced me to Chinese characters during calculus class. And to all my friends, language exchange partners, and contacts on Reddit and Discord who have helped me get this far, I have to thank you all again, and especially my icons, everyone who I really follow and look up to. So I guess to kind of close this off, Mandela definitely had the right idea, and for us polyglots, it's imperative that we expand his mission and that we can bring more aspects of language learning into our daily lives and show people why it's important, and also just being satisfied with ourselves and meeting other people like us. And by the time you see this in October, the plethora of probably pronunciation mistakes and all of that as a beginner in a few of these languages, hopefully they'll be fixed and I'll be a better, more experienced person by then, even over the course of like a month. So I'm going to get to improving now and present my best self in October, and I'm really excited for you guys to see this. And yeah, thank you all for listening. धन्यवादाः, and I'll see you in October.